First slide, hope. I want to talk about hope today. It's something that I think is a very relevant subject in the context of where we find ourselves. In 1990, a rock band called the Scorpions released a song titled Wind of Change. This song was one of the best-selling songs ever in the whole history of music, modern music. And it became the anthem for a generation who believed they could change their world for the better. It was a song that was released when the Berlin Wall came down. And this band, their lead singer, was a pretty smart songwriter, and he captured the heart of that generation and gave them hope. Video of that song, if you go and look at that song, I mean, they're a hard rock band. I love them. I think they're fantastic, and they've got very talented guitarists. I'm a guitarist and I love their music. But if you are not into hard rock music, it's a fairly soft one of their songs. But the video, which is on YouTube, has been watched nearly 1 billion times. So it is a significant piece of music in the modern history of humanity. Throughout the 90s, the Scorpions were a very prominent band, and they conveyed the heart of a generation through their music. Now, 30 years later, the Scorpions have released a surprise new song. And once again, they've tried to capture the heart of a generation. And the song is titled Sign of Hope, and expresses what many in the world are feeling, which is an absence of hope. The song Wind of Change was all about capturing the hope of a generation, a young generation who believed when the Berlin Wall came down that the world would change for the better. Now they've come out with this song which captures what they believe is the heart of people, the feeling of people in the world. After describing the lostness of a people in this song, the lyrics plead for hope. Okay, I'm not doing something right. You maybe got to hold it behind your back like that. Give me hope, just a little bit of hope, a little comfort for my soul. I think our world today is really lacking. I think they've captured again what the heart of the world is, what people are collectively feeling, and it's this loss of hope. People are struggling to find any kind of, optimism about the future. In 1 Corinthians 13, we read that 3 things will last forever, and that is faith, hope and love. The 3 constants of our faith that transcend time and space and history. And those 3 things are faith, hope and love. And a lot of people, when they're giving messages in churches and that, talk about faith and they talk about love, but there's not many sermons on hope because it's pretty hard to capture that and talk about that without the context of a bigger picture. But all of those things are in short supply in our COVID world. But most notably, there's this famine of hope. And we see that in the despair of people. When you lose hope, you become despairing. In 2020, we discovered this, that we were also suddenly, as a world, this thing that was often, many movies were made about, that we feared and hoped would never be a reality. Here's this pandemic, here's a virus, and it's out of control. It comes out of Asia, and it seems to be where most of the movies, it seems to always come out of Asia. And there's no way to treat it, to stop it, except to control the cross-infection. Well, all kinds of resources were thrown at, more resources than ever has been thrown at anything. For the first time in the history of humanity, we had a collective enemy that we all were trying to fight. Everybody, it didn't matter what our political position was, where we were in the world, what our culture, what our language, everybody was trying to fight this one enemy. And we were told throughout 2020 that if we can get a vaccine, everything will be good. We'll be okay, we'll get over this. Well, we got the vaccine, and as you know, I'm telling you modern history, you've lived it. I think everybody towards the end of 2020 thought, finally, 21's going to be just so much better. And then we go through 21 and it's so much worse. And people started to lose their hope. Now, I spend half of my time with people in our church environment, leaders in particular, leadership groups. But I also spend a significant amount of my time with global leaders, global ministry leaders, and pioneers of new ministry. And they were all wrestling with how do you adapt, how do you cope with a world that's shut down when we really need to be present in people's lives. And they come up with really amazing creative ways. And throughout the 20s, there was a fair bit of optimism. And actually there was quite a bit of hope that things will get better. In fact, things will be better than they were before, because we've found new ways to communicate with people. We've found new ways. We're being forced, actually, to do things in a different way. Some of the global organisational leaders, we work through processes of delivering training and equipping people and doing it a whole lot more efficiently than what they would have done if we hadn't had COVID. And so towards the end of 2020, there was this rising optimism and hope. But then 21 came and everything got shut down again, and then it got shut down again, and then it got worse. And then we got these new variants, and then the virus seemed to not be controlled as everybody thought it was going to be by the vaccine, and then the story. And now when I'm talking to these leaders towards the end of 21, they actually cannot be present in people's lives. We're involved in a lot of pioneering work and work that requires, when you're with church planters, heavily involved in church planting, if you're doing a pioneer church plant, you don't know the people you're going to reach. And you need to be present in their life to do the church plant. You've actually got to be visible and you've got to be present. And the amount of frustration and the way things were shut down on some of these pioneering, and then ministries that are trying to pioneer new nations and all that was... 2020 was, well, how can we adjust? How can we pivot to something new? And, we're able to train our leaders, but now we're not even actually allowed to deliver all these things that we're training people to do. So I saw, even in the context that I was operating in, with Christian leaders who often are far more hopeful and positive than the people around them, and they're coming and they're offering that hope, they started to lose that optimism. They started to lose that sense of hope. But the people they saw around them were completely devoid of any hope, of any possibility. They had something to hang on to beyond this world, They had something that they felt good about, but they wanted to be able to share it. So I guess it was more frustration, but there were people around them. And now we see that even though we've met all of these targets with regards to the numbers being vaccinated, and we would all be free again, we're not, because along comes another variant, and now we've got to be triple vaccinated to be validated. And it's quite understandable by the science and everything. But you also see in our world all these, in our local context, people haven't been able to access the things that are really important to them. And when you've got elderly parents and you want to visit them in an aged care facility and you haven't seen them for months, and you need to turn up and you can't. And when somebody's got a condition that's considered not crucial, surgery, that is what they call elective. Well, some of that elective surgery, if people don't get it, they're getting worse and worse in their condition. And the stories, I'm sure, personally. And so there's this collective loss of hope globally. So how do we speak into that as believers? What do we do in that context we find ourselves in. How do we share our experience with God that transcends our circumstances? And when we fall back into that deep sense of God's presence, it brings this peace and this sense of hope, and that in the end Jesus is going to be victorious. So we've got that. How do we share that with all these people who now can't even get the support that they need for the mental health issues that they're dealing with? I've talked to a number of people in those sectors of our society, and they can't cope with the overwhelming number of people who need help. Well, I think Scorpions again, I'll go back to them, capture this. In troubled times we need a friend. We keep on waiting for better times. Help me, God, here I am, alone with all my fears tonight. Give me hope, just a little bit of hope, a little comfort for my soul. So in trying to capture what's going on with people and find some kind of hope in this, what do they identify here? They identify the loneliness, the fact that hope maybe resides in companionship or in a relationship. But we don't know how to get that, because if you look at the whole song, and so I go out in these empty streets, I can't find what I think I might need, which is that companionship, which is somebody to give me a bit of hope. And then bring God into this little verse here. I just think that's interesting. Help me, God, here I am. You know, at Christmas we've just celebrated Christmas, the birth of Jesus, and that's when you often hear this term, hope for the world, or the hope of the world. Jesus is described as the hope of the world. There actually is a verse in the Bible where he's described as that, and it's in Matthew 12:21. His name will be the hope of all the world. Jesus is described, particularly at Christmas, as the purveyor of hope, somebody who brings hope to this world. How does he do that? Well, he comes and he offers companionship. He offers a promise of a better future. He identifies us as objects of love, as people who matter, as someone who is valued and who has a unique purpose in this world. So how are people to find hope? How are they to overcome this pandemic of mental health and despair? It's really a pandemic of despair. If you analyse what is going on in people's lives and why they are so distressed, it's because they've lost hope, because they've got, I'm never going to get the things that I need. I'm never going to have access to my parents. I'm never going to be able to get that operation I need. I'm never going to able to go to that place I need to go to. You hear this, it's never going to happen. I've lost hope, and it's despair. What can we offer? How can they find hope? And I think they can find hope by being noticed, by having a companion that listens to them and conveys to them that they're objects of love, that they are people who matter, that they are someone who is valued and has a unique purpose in this world. They need someone to change their perspective of themselves and as a consequence change their perspectives of their circumstances, providing hope that will not only get them through today but tomorrow and the next week and the rest of their lives. So hope, I think this is why maybe people don't speak much about hope, because hope doesn't change your circumstances. It just changes your perspective of your circumstances. And a lot of people want their circumstances changed. And often we can't do things to change the circumstances. So this is something that I've talked through with some of the leaders. And they say, I don't even know, I've heard this said, these words said to me quite a few times. I don't know how to give hope to my people anymore. I can't change their circumstances. So if we go out with this perspective that we're going to change their circumstances, We might be able to. We might be able to do something. But hope is not having your circumstances change. It changes your perspective of your circumstances by changing your perspective of yourself. Many, many years ago, I was a pastor of a church and started to reach into the community and basically worked out by asking all the people in the community, what can we do to serve you? Help our kids. So we went out and started reaching kids, and that's a story in itself. And we started connecting with all these kids who were in the community, and when you start doing things like that and you're in the schools and you're out into society and you hear from the leaders of the community and from the leaders of the school, well, if you're going to help our kids, help these ones, help these. So we tended to pick up the ones that were in troubled times or difficult. If I go to, I had a master's, I just completed a master's degree in clinical psych. I went and offered my services to the school and they said, well, I'll help this group, and it was the troubled ones. Anyway, we mobilised young people to reach young people, and we started having all these young people joining the church and coming to this Wednesday night Bible study. It really was their church. That's where they found what was missing, and companionship and love and acceptance. There was always new people. In fact, in the end, we had 70 or 80 kids coming to a house, and we had to go to a bigger house. In the end, we had to go to the biggest house that we had in our church community, which was owned by a lawyer, and they were everywhere. They were hanging off the balcony and up the stairs, and I just talked to them about life. And many of those were the friends. They would bring their friends, and they weren't believers. So I didn't know what I was going to end up. One guy used to bring his odd things, and he brought a squash bag one night, and I said, "Oh, Trevor, you're going to actually do something good for yourself and play squash." He said, "No," and he opens it up. It's a sawn-off shotgun. So we just put it at the door with the shoes, and he took it when he went. So, there were some kids there that were pretty out there. Well, this girl turned up that night, and I would drive these kids home because somehow they got there and they didn't, So she said she lived in Dandenong. We were in Glen Waverley. So I said, I'll drive you home, and I'm dropping kids off on the way. Her name was Helen. And I'm talking to her, and she says, "Oh, I'm a bit afraid to go home." I said, "Well, tell us about where you live." "I live with my boyfriend at the moment. His name's Hammer." I go, "Okay." Now, at that time, hammer was a word that was used for heroin. So I said, "Oh, so does he deal smack? Does he deal heroin?" "No, he's called Hammer because he smashed a guy's head in with a hammer." I'm going, "Well, okay." And she said, "I'm afraid to go home tonight because he's pretty angry at me. And I'm not sure what he'll do to me." I said, "Well, that's terrible." I'm thinking, what am I going to do with this girl? We already had kids in our, we were full in our house. And then she just said out of the blue, "You know what? If I got hit by a bus tonight, I don't think anybody would care. I just want to know that there would be somebody who cared if I got killed tonight. And there's nobody." Well, I turned the car around and drove her back. I said, "Oh, you're not going home tonight. I'll find somewhere for you. And at that stage, I just read this book titled Disciple by Carlos Ortiz. And it talks about how nothing belongs to you. When you become a believer, you give it all to Jesus. And then he gives it back to you so you can borrow it for a while. But, he's going to ask you for it at any time. And, he might want your car or, your house or something. And so it's not yours anymore. So I drive Helen to these people's place and I knock on their door and say, "Hi, Warren and Elaine." Like, it was fairly late at night. They were late night people, so they were still up. "This is Helen, and she needs somewhere to stay tonight, and I know that your son's just left, and so you've got a spare room, and Jesus needs that room. And it's his anyway, so Helen needs to be in that room." Well, what could they say? And I was young, I'm in my 20s, I didn't know what it meant to be a pastor. I didn't know what you were allowed to do and not allowed to do. It sounded pretty reasonable to me. Now I think about it, how would you like it if I turned up at your place with this girl who's like pretty out there with things sticking out of it everywhere, you know. But they took it. And I thought, this is one nice solution, I'll go back and sort it out later. And then I checked with them the next day and they said, look, we want to look after her for longer. And so they kept her and they kept her. And in the end, we did find a more permanent solution for Helen. But she became a believer. And her whole perspective changed. And her whole perspective of herself changed. And I saw this transformation where she found hope. Now, why did she find hope? Well, she found it because an agent of hope. She encountered an agent of hope who told her about Jesus, who shared with her the love of Jesus, who told her that she mattered, who became a companion and ultimately introduced her to the greatest companion. So her circumstances, I can tell you what, her circumstances didn't change. She still came from a terribly dysfunctional family. She had drug issues. She had no way to look after herself. So her circumstances didn't radically change. But a whole perspective of her circumstances did. And it gave her hope, and she became somebody who believed in herself after a while and was transformed. Now, we have this pandemic of hope, of despair, and we have the hope that can speak into that. The problem is with people now, there's this cacophony of people who are in need, and it's so loud that nobody can get heard. So what do we as believers offer? We offer a listening ear. We offer to take notice of these people. We offer to give them hope by being a companion. We can become agents of hope in this lost and hurting world. Jesus says through the prophets, I believe Jesus speaks to us through the whole Bible, and it says that the Lord, this verse that you will be familiar with, most of you, was spoken to the people of Israel, and they say, well, it's not really, I've heard people say it's not relevant today, it was spoken to a particular, you know, you read this verse, this is what God said to his people. We're his people, it's what God says to us. And if you go and look at the New Testament, this is reflected in many, many statements in the New Testament. And I believe this is a great summary of God's perspective of us as his people. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. I want to share this verse with everybody I encounter who are in despair. And I think that should be on the hearts of everybody who follows Jesus. Let's pray. Lord, thank you for giving us hope, and thank you that you have hope to offer to this world. I just pray that we'll be purveyors of that hope, and that we'll be instruments by which others can experience the love that you offer, the faith, but they'll be given hope in what is a pretty hopeless situation without you. I ask this in your name, Jesus. Amen.